I am Joshua. I'm 27 years old, and 5 years ago I was kicked out of my family home with nothing but the clothes on my back and a debit card I swore I would never use. Before I tell you about the shocking discovery that turned my life upside down, let me know where you guys are watching from in the comments below. The wind in Chicago doesn't just blow. It cuts. It slices right through whatever cheap fabric you're wearing and settles in your bones. But that Tuesday morning, the cold outside was nothing compared to the burning fire screaming up my right arm. I stood outside the heavy glass revolving doors of Liberty Trust Bank, hesitating. My breath puffed out in white clouds that were whipped away instantly by the gale. I looked down at my reflection in the polished glass. I looked like a wreck. My coat was a thrift store find, 2 sizes too big and smelling faintly of mothballs. My boots were held together with duct tape that was peeling in the wet snow. And my face looked like a roadmap of exhaustion. Dark circles, hollow cheeks, and eyes that had seen too much worry for a guy in his 20s. But I didn't have a choice. I gripped my right forearm with my left hand, trying to steady the tremors. The pain was a living thing, a rhythmic throb that synced with my heartbeat. Every pulse sent a fresh wave of agony shooting up to my shoulder. I pushed through the door. The silence of the bank lobby hit me first. It wasn't empty, but it was quiet, that expensive, hushed kind of quiet where money is being moved around. The air was warm, smelling of stale coffee and expensive perfume. It should have been comforting, but to me, it felt suffocating. I walked toward the line, keeping my head down. I could feel the eyes on me. A man in a tailored charcoal suit stepped subtly to the left as I passed, pulling his briefcase closer to his leg. A woman with a designer handbag wrinkled her nose, not even trying to hide her distaste. I didn't blame them. I smelled like the diner I worked at, burnt grease, onions, and old dishwater. And under that, the metallic tang of the burn on my arm. I waited. The line moved with agonizing slowness. Every minute standing there felt like an hour. My arm was screaming now. I needed antibiotics. I needed burn cream. I needed painkillers. The doctor at the free clinic had told me I was risking a serious infection if I didn't get the prescription filled immediately. But the prescription cost $80. I had $12 in my pocket. My landlord, a guy who had the empathy of a brick wall, had slid a bright red eviction notice under my door that morning. If I didn't pay the back rent by Friday, I was on the street. So here I was, about to do the one thing I promised myself I would never do. Next, a voice called out. It wasn't friendly. I stepped up to the counter. The teller was a woman named Mrs. Adrian, according to her silver name tag. She was older, with hair sprayed into a helmet of perfection and nails that looked like they had never done a day of manual labor in their life. She didn't look me in the eye. She looked at my coat. She looked at the duct tape on my boots. Then she looked at the computer screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, as if she was waiting for me to ask for a handout. "How can I help you?" she asked. The tone suggested she hoped I would say I was lost and leave. My throat was dry. I coughed, trying to clear it. I need to make a withdrawal. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the wallet. It was a cheap Velcro thing, fraying at the edges. I dug into the back slot, past the few single-dollar bills, past the library card, to the very back. I pulled it out. The card was blue, with the Liberty Trust logo faded almost to white. It was bent slightly in the middle, a permanent crease from the night 5 years ago when I had tried to snap it in half. The plastic was scratched and worn, looking more like a piece of trash than a financial instrument. I slid it across the cold marble counter. Mrs. Adrian looked at the card, then looked at me. Her eyebrows shot up toward her hairline. She reached out and picked it up with 2 fingers, her pinky extended, as if the card itself was contagious. "This card," she said, her voice dripping with skepticism. "It's in terrible condition. I'm not even sure the reader will accept it." "It should work," I said, my voice raspy. "It's never been used." She let out a short, sharp sigh, a sound of pure annoyance. "Do you have ID?" I handed over my driver's license. She scrutinized it, looking back and forth between my face and the photo. In the photo, I was 22. I looked younger, healthier, filled with a naive hope that had long since been beaten out of me. Joshua Sterling. She read the name aloud. She paused. The name Sterling meant something in this city. My father had built a manufacturing empire. My family name was on hospital wings and library plaques. But looking at me, standing there in my greasy coat, she clearly couldn't connect the dots. Yes, I said. Just, please check the balance. I need to withdraw $1,000. I knew exactly how much was on there. $1,000. That was the pity payment my brother Elijah had thrown at me. That was the price tag he had put on our brotherhood. Mrs. Adrian let out a small scoff. $1,000? She looked at my clothes again. It was clear she didn't believe I had $10 to my name, let alone 1,000. Sir, if there are insufficient funds, there will be a fee for the inquiry. Just swipe it, I said, a flash of irritation breaking through my shame. The pain in my arm flared again, sharp and hot. Please. She rolled her eyes, a gesture so unprofessional it stung. She turned to her computer and slid the battered card through the reader on her keyboard. I held my breath. I was praying the magnetic strip still worked after 5 years of sitting in a wallet that had been sat on, dropped, and soaked in rain. I was praying that Elijah hadn't canceled it just to be spiteful. I was praying that I could walk out of here with the cash, go to the pharmacy, and then go home to sleep for 12 hours. Mrs. Adrian stared at the screen. She frowned. She hit a key, then another. That's odd, she muttered. What? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Is it declined? If it was declined, I was dead. I had no other options. No savings. No friends I could borrow from. Caleb had already done too much for me over the years. I couldn't ask him for rent money again. Mrs. Adrian didn't answer. She swiped the card again. Harder this time. Suddenly, a sound shattered the quiet murmur of the bank lobby. It wasn't a beep. It wasn't a chime. It was a siren. A loud, piercing, oscillating alarm that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Red lights mounted on the ceiling began to flash. The computer monitor in front of Mrs. Adrian turned a bright, aggressive crimson. The reaction was instant. Every conversation in the lobby stopped. The man in the charcoal suit dropped his briefcase. The security guard by the door, a heavy-set man who had been leaning against the wall, snapped to attention, his hand going instinctively to the holster at his hip. My blood ran cold. I stood frozen, my hand still extended on the counter. The noise was deafening. It sounded like a police siren. I stammered, backing away slightly. I didn't do anything. But Mrs. Adrian wasn't looking at me with suspicion anymore. She was looking at the screen with absolute terror. Her face had drained of all color, leaving her makeup standing out like a mask. Her hands were shaking so bad she knocked her stapler off the desk. Sir, don't move, the security guard barked, stepping toward me. I raised my hands, ignoring the searing pain in my burned arm. It's my card, I swear. My parents gave it to me. Panic rose in my chest like bile. Elijah. It had to be Elijah. He must have reported the card stolen years ago. He must have set a trap, waiting for the day I would be desperate enough to use it. He knew I would eventually break. He knew I would come crawling back for the crumbs, and he had set a snare to catch me. I was going to jail. I was going to be arrested for fraud or theft or identity theft. With my public defender and no money for bail, I'd rot in a cell. Mrs. Adrian grabbed the phone on her desk. She didn't dial a generic extension. She punched a single button, her eyes wide and fixed on me, but not with contempt, with fear. Mr. Thomas! She practically screamed into the receiver, her voice cracking. Mr. Thomas? Get to Station 5. Now, we have a code red. It's a priority trust card. She looked at me, breathing hard. The system, it's locked everything down. I just wanted the $1,000. I whispered, my voice trembling. You can keep the card. I'll just go. No, she shouted, reaching over the counter as if to grab me, though she didn't dare touch my dirty coat. You can't leave. "The manager is coming. Please, sir. Just wait." "Sir?" She had called me sir. The security guard had stopped halfway to the counter. He looked confused. He looked from Mrs. Adrian's terrified face to the flashing red screen, then back to me. He took his hand off his weapon. The alarm was still blaring, a rhythmic shriek that drilled into my skull. Then, the door to the executive offices at the back of the bank burst open. A man ran out. He wasn't walking, he was running. He was a tall man, balding, wearing a suit that cost more than I made in a year. He scanned the lobby, his eyes wild. When he saw the flashing light at Station 5, he sprinted toward us, almost tripping over a velvet rope. "Turn it off!" he yelled at the security guard. "Kill the alarm. Now!" The guard scrambled to a panel on the wall and punched in a code. The siren cut off instantly, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. The manager, Mr. Thomas, skidded to a halt in front of me. He was breathless. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He looked at Mrs. Adrian, then down at the battered blue card sitting on the marble counter. He reached out and picked it up. His hands were shaking too. He turned it over, checked the signature, and then looked at me. He didn't look at the grease on my coat. He didn't look at the duct tape on my boots. He looked me straight in the eyes with an expression I had never seen directed at me before. It was awe. "Mr. Sterling?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Joshua Sterling?" I nodded slowly, too terrified to speak. "My apologies," he said, bowing his head slightly. "My deepest, sincerest apologies for this disturbance. Please, come with me." He gestured toward the VIP section, the area behind the frosted glass where they served the millionaires. "Am I in trouble?" I asked, my voice cracking. Mr. Thomas looked at me, and for a second his professional mask slipped. "Trouble? Good heavens, no, Mr. Sterling. We've been waiting for you. For 5 years. We have been waiting for you." To understand why I was shaking in that bank lobby, terrified of my own name, you have to go back. You have to understand the day my life ended. It was 5 years ago, the day of the funeral. My parents, Robert and Mary Sterling, had died together. A factory fire, a massive gas explosion at the main manufacturing plant. They were on a site visit. They died instantly, the authorities said. I hoped that was true. I hoped they didn't feel any pain. The funeral was a spectacle. Half of Chicago's elite showed up. Men in black suits who checked their watches during the eulogy. Women in veils who whispered about stock prices while dabbing dry eyes. It was a networking event disguised as a tragedy. I sat in the front row, staring at the 2 closed caskets. I felt hollowed out. I was 22, just out of college, and I felt like a child who had lost his way in the dark. My parents were the only people who had ever made me feel safe. They had adopted me when I was 3, saving me from a foster system that chewed kids up. They had loved me. At least I thought they had. Next to me sat Elijah. Elijah was my older brother, their biological son. He was 5 years older than me, taller, broader, with the classic Sterling jawline and eyes that always seemed to be calculating what you were worth. He sat with his wife, Chloe. Chloe was checking her makeup in a compact mirror, sighing loudly every few minutes as if her grief was an inconvenience to her schedule. Elijah didn't cry. He didn't look at the caskets. He spent the entire service scrolling through messages on his phone, hiding it behind a hymnal. After the service, we went back to the estate. The Sterling Manor, a sprawling Gothic mansion on the North Shore that I had called home for 19 years. The reading of the will took place in the library. The room smelled of old paper, leather, and the heavy scent of lilies from the funeral arrangements. Mr. Lincoln, the family lawyer, sat behind my father's massive oak desk. Mr. Lincoln was a good man, or so I had always thought. He had known me since I was a kid. He used to give me peppermint candies when I came to his office with Dad. But that day, Mr. Lincoln wouldn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the papers in front of him, his hands trembling slightly. "Let's get this over with," Elijah said, pouring himself a drink from the crystal decanter. He didn't offer one to anyone else. I have a flight to Cabo in the morning. I need to know what the liquidity looks like. Elijah, please, I said softly. Can we just take a moment? Shut up, Joshua, Chloe snapped. She was inspecting her nails. Nobody cares about your sentimental act. You're just worried about your cut. I flinched. It's not about the money. It's always about the money, Elijah said, taking a sip of the scotch. Read it, Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln cleared his throat. I, Robert Sterling, being of sound mind. He went through the standard legal jargon. And then the hammer dropped. To my eldest son, Elijah Sterling, I leave the entirety of the Sterling estate, including the family home, the vacation properties, the car collection, and the controlling shares of Sterling Manufacturing. Elijah smirked. He raised his glass in a mock toast to the empty room. As it should be. And, Mr. Lincoln continued, his voice barely audible now, to Joshua Sterling. My heart stopped. I didn't care about the shares. I didn't care about the cars. I just wanted something. A memento. The watch my dad wore. My mom's piano. Something to tell me that I was their son too. I leave the sum of $1,000. Silence. The room went dead silent. Even the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to stop ticking. 1,000. Elijah repeated. Then he started to laugh. A cruel, barking laugh that bounced off the mahogany walls. $1,000? That's it? That's less than I tip my caddy. I sat there, frozen. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. $1,000? It wasn't an inheritance. It was a tip. It was a dismissal. Mr. Lincoln reached into his briefcase and pulled out a plain white envelope. He slid it across the desk toward me. He looked sick. This is for you, Joshua, he said softly. Before I could reach for it, Elijah snatched it up. He tore it open, ripping the paper. He pulled out a blue debit card. Look at this, Elijah crowed, holding it up like a trophy. A preloaded debit card, like a gift card you give a maid at Christmas. Oh, this is rich. This is perfect. Give it to me, I said, standing up. My legs felt weak. Mom and Dad finally admitted it, Elijah sneered, walking toward me. They finally put it in writing. You were never really one of us, Josh. You were a pet. A charity case they picked up to make themselves feel good. But when it came down to it, blood is thicker than water. That's not true, I stammered, tears stinging my eyes. They loved me. Did they? Elijah got right in my face. I could smell the scotch on his breath. If they loved you, would they leave you with nothing? They left the empire to the real son, and they left the scraps to the stray. He flicked the card at me. It hit my chest and clattered to the floor. Take it, Elijah spat. Take your $1,000 and get out. What? I looked at him, confused. Get out? I live here. Not anymore, Chloe chimed in from the sofa. She smiled, a cold, reptilian curving of her lips. The house is Elijah's. The will said so, and we don't want house guests. We're redecorating, starting with the guest rooms. You can't do this, I said, looking at Mr. Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln, tell them. I have 30 days, right? Legally. Mr. Lincoln opened his mouth, but Elijah slammed his hand on the desk. You want to get legal, little brother? Elijah hissed. I'll bury you in legal fees. I'll make sure that $1,000 goes to a lawyer before you even buy a sandwich. Get out. Now. He grabbed my arm, the same arm that was burned today, and shoved me toward the door. Wait. My things, I yelled. My clothes. My laptop. I'll have the maid box up whatever isn't trash and leave it on the curb tomorrow, Elijah said. If you're still on the property in 10 minutes, I'm calling the police for trespassing. He shoved me out into the hallway. The heavy oak doors of the library slammed shut in my face. I heard the lock click. I stood in the foyer for a second, stunned. The house I grew up in. The floor where I learned to walk. It was suddenly enemy territory. I bent down and picked up the blue debit card from the rug. Felt light, cheap. I walked to the front door and opened it. The blizzard hit me instantly. 5 years ago, the storm was even worse than today. The snow was coming down in sheets, horizontal and blinding. I didn't have my coat. It was in the closet upstairs. I was wearing my funeral suit, a thin black jacket and dress pants. I stepped out onto the porch. The wind screamed. I walked down the long, winding driveway. The snow soaked through my dress shoes in seconds. My teeth started to chatter uncontrollably. I wrapped my arms around myself, hunching forward against the gale. I walked for 3 miles. Every step was a battle. I couldn't feel my toes. My ears were burning with the cold. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the hole in my chest. They didn't love me. The thought looped in my brain like a broken record. They didn't love me. I was a charity case. I was a mistake. I finally reached Caleb's apartment building. Caleb was my best friend from college. He lived in a cramped 2-bedroom place above a bakery. I pounded on the door, my fist barely working. Caleb opened it. He took one look at me, soaking wet, blue-lipped, shaking violently, and pulled me inside without a word. "My God, Josh," he said, grabbing a blanket from the sofa. "What happened? Where's your car?" "Elijah," I managed to say, my jaw locked. He took everything. That night, I sat on Caleb's radiator trying to stop the shivering. I pulled the debit card out of my wet pocket. I looked at it. It represented everything I had lost. It was an insult, a final slap in the face from the grave. I gripped it with both hands. I bent it. I wanted to snap it in two. I wanted to throw the pieces in the trash and never think about the name Sterling again. The plastic bent. It turned white at the stress point in the middle. But I stopped. I couldn't do it. I don't know why. Maybe because it was the last thing my mother had touched. Maybe because I was scared of being completely broke. I lowered my hands. I shoved the bent card into the back of my wallet, behind my library card. "I'll keep it," I whispered to the empty room. "I'll keep it to remember who they really were." And for 5 years that card stayed there. A scar I carried in my pocket. Life has a way of beating the dignity out of you one shift at a time. For the next 5 years, Joshua Sterling ceased to exist. I became just Josh, the guy who washed dishes and bussed tables at the Rusty Spoon. The Rusty Spoon was a dive diner on the south side of the city. It was the kind of place where the menu was sticky, the floor was always slick with grease, and the customers tipped in quarters, if they tipped at all. My life became a blur of survival. I worked double shifts, 6 days a week. I scrubbed pots until my hands were raw and blistered. I mopped floors until my back seized up. I rented a basement studio apartment that was technically illegal. It had no windows, the pipes rattled all night, and when it rained, the carpet smelled like wet dog. I learned to budget down to the penny. Ramen noodles were a luxury. A fresh apple was a treat. I avoided the news. I avoided the society pages. But in Chicago, the Sterling name was inescapable. I heard the rumors. The customers at the diner would read the paper and talk. "Did you see the bash Elijah Sterling threw?" one guy said, chewing on a toothpick. "Great Gatsby theme. They say he filled a fountain with champagne." "Must be nice," his buddy replied. "I heard he bought another Lambo. Yellow one this time." I kept my head down, wiping the counter. A yellow Lamborghini. While I was deciding if I could afford to do laundry this week or if I should just wash my socks in the sink again. It wasn't just the money. It was the injustice. Elijah had never worked a day in his life. He had failed out of 2 colleges. He had lost thousands on sports betting. Yet he was living like a king in the house my father built, while I was scraping gum off the bottom of tables. But I had my pride. I never called him. I never asked for help. I was determined to make it on my own, even if making it meant just not starving to death. Then came the accident. It was the lunch rush. The diner was packed. Anthony, the manager, was screaming orders from the pass-through window. Anthony was a short, angry man who believed that fear was the best motivator. "Table 4 needs their soup, Josh. Move it," Anthony yelled. I grabbed the tray. A large bowl of boiling hot tomato bisque was sloshing in the center. I turned too fast. A kid ran out from under a table. I tried to dodge him. My boot slipped on a patch of grease. I went down. The tray tipped. The bowl of soup overturned. It didn't hit the floor. It hit my arm. The pain was instantaneous and blinding. Felt like my skin was being peeled off. I screamed. Couldn't help it. I dropped to the floor, clutching my arm as the boiling liquid soaked into my shirt. The diner went silent. "You idiot!" Anthony shouted. He wasn't asking if I was okay. He was looking at the mess on the floor. "Look what you did. That's a loss. That comes out of your check." I gritted my teeth, tears streaming down my face. I rolled up my sleeve. The skin was bright red, blistering instantly. Large, angry bubbles were forming. I need to go to the hospital," I gasped. "You walk out during a rush. Don't bother coming back," Anthony said, stepping over me to pick up a napkin holder. "Anthony, look at my arm," I yelled, holding it up. He glanced at it and winced, but his face hardened. "Fine, go. But you're off the schedule for the rest of the week. I can't have a cripple slowing down the line." "You can't do that," I said. "I need the hours. I need my salary. You're an hourly employee, Josh. No work, no pay. Now get out before you scare the customers." I stumbled out of the diner, wrapping my arm in my apron. I went to the free clinic. The doctor, a tired woman with kind eyes, cleaned the burn. She told me it was a severe second-degree burn. It needed daily dressing changes and powerful antibiotics to prevent infection. "The prescription is $80, she said apologetically. "And you need to take a week off work. You can't be around grease and steam with this." I walked home in a daze. When I got to my basement door, I saw the red paper taped to it. Eviction notice. Final warning. I owed 2 months' rent. My landlord had been patient, but his patience had run out. If I didn't pay $800 by Friday, he was changing the locks. I went inside and sat on my sagging mattress. My arm throbbed with a pulse of fire. My stomach grumbled. I did the math. I had $12 in my pocket. My checking account had $4.50. I needed $80 for medicine. I needed $800 for rent. And I had no job for a week. I was drowning. I sat there for hours watching a spider crawl across the ceiling. I thought about Elijah. I pictured him in the library, drinking Dad's scotch, laughing at me. "Take your $1,000 and get out." I had sworn I would never use it. I had sworn I would rather die than take his pity money. But I didn't want to die. Not from an infection. Not on the street. I stood up. I walked to the dresser where my old wallet lay. I opened it and dug out the blue card. It looked pathetic. Scratched. Bent. The magnetic strip was worn. "Just this once," I whispered. "Just to survive." I put on my coat. I taped up my boots. And I walked out into the cold, heading for Liberty Trust Bank. Back in the present, the silence in the VIP room was heavy. Mr. Thomas, the bank manager, had ushered me into a private office that was bigger than my entire apartment. The walls were lined with leather-bound books. There was a Persian rug on the floor that probably cost more than a car. I sat on the edge of a leather sofa, clutching my burned arm. The adrenaline from the alarm was starting to fade, replaced by a sick, gnawing anxiety. Mr. Thomas was pacing back and forth. He had dismissed Mrs. Adrian, who had left the room looking like she had seen a ghost. "Mr. Sterling," Thomas said, stopping and looking at me. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Brandy?" "I just want to know what's going on," I said. "Why did the alarm go off? Is the card stolen? If it is, I didn't know. I swear." Mr. Thomas laughed nervously. "Stolen? No. The alarm was a security protocol. A silent sentinel. It's programmed to trigger whenever a dormant Tier 1 account is activated after a long period of inactivity. It alerts senior management immediately to prevent unauthorized access. Tier 1. I frowned. "It's a debit card. It has $1,000 on it." Mr. Thomas looked at me with confusion. $1,000? Who told you that?" "The lawyer. At the reading of the will, Mr. Thomas walked over to his desk. He picked up the blue card. He handled it with reverence now. Mr. Sterling, this isn't a standard debit card. This is a master key access card. It was issued 5 years ago under a blind trust. A blind trust? Yes, the Phoenix Trust. Established by Robert and Mary Sterling, my parents. Hearing their names made my chest tighten. I don't understand, I said. Why would they give me a fancy card for $1,000? Mr. Thomas sat down behind his desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file folder. He opened it and spun it around so I could see. Mr. Sterling, he said softly, the balance on this account is not $1,000. I looked at the paper. There were a lot of numbers. My eyes were blurry from exhaustion. I squinted. I saw a 5, then a comma, then 3 zeros, then another comma, then 3 more zeros. $5 million. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. The number didn't change. 5. My voice failed. 5 million. Plus interest accrued over the last 5 years, Mr. Thomas added. The principal was invested in high-yield municipal bonds and aggressive tech stocks. The portfolio has performed exceptionally well. The room started to spin. I felt bile rise in my throat. This is a mistake, I said. This has to be a mistake. Elijah got everything. I got the scraps. There is no mistake, a new voice said. I turned around. Standing in the doorway of the office was a man I hadn't seen in 5 years. Mr. Lincoln, the family lawyer. He looked older. His hair was completely white now. He was holding a leather briefcase, and his face was etched with a mixture of sadness and relief. Mr. Lincoln? I gasped. He walked into the room and nodded to Mr. Thomas. Thank you, Thomas. I'll take it from here. Mr. Thomas stood up immediately. Of course. I'll be outside if you need anything. He gave me one last look, a look of pure deference, and closed the door. I was alone with the lawyer. You knew, I whispered. You sat there at the funeral and told me I had nothing. You watched Elijah throw me out. Mr. Lincoln sighed. He sat down in the chair opposite me. He looked tired. I didn't just know, Joshua. I drafted the trust. And I swore an oath to your parents that I would not say a word until you activated that card yourself. Why? I demanded, anger flaring up through the shock. Why would they do that? Why would they let me suffer? Do you know where I live? Do you know what I've been eating? Look at me. I held up my burned arm. I gestured to my dirty coat. I've been living in hell for 5 years. Why? Mr. Lincoln didn't answer immediately. He placed his briefcase on the table and clicked the latches open. He pulled out an iPad. I can't explain it as well as they can, he said. He handed me the iPad. On the screen was a video file. The thumbnail showed my parents, sitting on the sofa in the library. They were holding hands. Press play, Mr. Lincoln said softly. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the device. I touched the screen. The video began. Hello, Joshua. My father's voice filled the quiet room. Hearing it was like a physical blow. He looked tired in the video. His skin was gray. My mother sat next to him, her eyes red, as if she had been crying. If you are watching this, my father said, then at least 5 years have passed, and you have finally used the card. My mother squeezed his hand. She leaned toward the camera. We are so sorry, my baby. We are so sorry for what we had to do. We didn't have a choice, Dad said, his voice firming up. About 6 months ago, we found out the truth about Elijah. I watched, mesmerized. The truth about Elijah? Your brother is sick, Josh, Dad said. He has a gambling addiction. A bad one. We found out he had leveraged his future inheritance to borrow money from very dangerous people. Loan sharks. Cartels. He owes millions. I stared at the screen. Elijah? The golden child? We tried to help him, Mom whispered. We paid off his debts twice. But he went right back. He doesn't just spend money. He destroys it. We knew that if we died, Dad continued, Elijah would come for everything. If we split the estate, if we gave you half, Elijah's creditors would come after you. Or worse, Elijah would threaten you, sue you, or hurt you to get your share. He is desperate, and desperation makes men dangerous. Tears rolled down my cheeks. So we came up with a plan, Dad said. A terrible, painful plan. We had to make Elijah believe he had one. We had to give him the house, the cars, the public assets. We made them the bait. We knew he would burn through it, Mom said. We calculated it. The house, the business shares. With his spending habits and his debts, it would take him about 5 years to lose it all. We created the Phoenix Trust for you, Dad said. We put all our liquid cash, the life insurance policies, everything that couldn't be easily traced into that account. And we locked it. Even if you found out, you couldn't touch it for 5 years. We needed you to be poor, Josh. We needed you to be off the radar. We needed you to be safe from his creditors. We had to break your heart to save your life, Mom sobbed. We had to let you think we didn't love you, and it killed us. Every day it killed us. But know this, Dad said, looking straight into the camera. His eyes were fierce. You were the son we were proud of. You were the one who worked hard. You were the one with the good heart. Elijah has our blood, but you have our spirit. The money in that account is yours, Mom said. Build a life. Be happy. And forgive us. Please, forgive us. The screen went black. I sat there, the iPad heavy in my lap. The silence in the room was absolute. My parents didn't hate me. They hadn't abandoned me. They had played the villains to save me. They had died letting me think they were monsters, just so I wouldn't be dragged down by Elijah's anchors. I put my head in my hands and wept. Not the polite crying of a funeral, but deep, guttural sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for the 5 years of poverty. I cried for the loneliness. But mostly, I cried from relief. I was loved. Mr. Lincoln let me cry. He handed me a handkerchief and waited until my breathing slowed. They wanted to tell you, Mr. Lincoln said. Your mother wrote you a letter every week. She burned them all. She was terrified that if Elijah found out, you would be in danger. I wiped my face. So, it's over? The 5 years are up. The trust matured yesterday, Lincoln said. You have full access. The $5 million is yours. Tax-free, mostly, thanks to the insurance structure. $5 million. I looked at my burned arm. I could pay for the best doctors in the world. I could buy the rusty spoon and fire Anthony. I could buy the whole block. What about Elijah? I asked. What happened to him? Mr. Lincoln's expression hardened. He reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a different file. Your father's calculations were remarkably accurate, Lincoln said. Elijah didn't just spend the money. He invested heavily in a cryptocurrency scheme that collapsed last month. And he mortgaged the estate. 3 times. 3 times. He forged documents. He bribed appraisers. But the house of cards has fallen. The bank, this bank actually, initiated foreclosure proceedings this morning. My eyes widened. He's losing the house? He has already lost it, Lincoln corrected. The eviction notice is being served next week. The property is going to a blind auction tomorrow morning to settle the debts. It's a fire sale. A fire sale. The house I grew up in. The house Elijah kicked me out of. A strange, cold feeling settled over me. It wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. Mr. Lincoln, I said, sitting up straighter. You said it's a blind auction? Yes. Sealed bids. Can I bid? Mr. Lincoln smiled. It was a small, sharp smile. With your current liquidity, you can outbid anyone in the city. I want that house, I said. The decision was instant. I want to buy it, but I don't want Elijah to know it's me. Not until the ink is dry. We can set up a shell company, Lincoln suggested. Anonymity is easy. Do it, I said. Buy it back. Everything. The furniture, the art, the memories. Bring it back to the family. The real family. I walked out of the bank an hour later, but I wasn't the same man who had walked in. I still wore the dirty coat. I still had the tape on my boots, but my back was straight. My head was up. In my pocket, next to the battered blue card, was a sleek black infinity card that Mr. Thomas had practically begged me to take. My first stop was the hospital, not the free clinic, the best private hospital in Chicago. I walked into the ER. The receptionist looked at my clothes and started to point toward the sign for the public aid window. "I need a plastic surgeon for a burn," I said, cutting her off. "And a private room." "Sir, we require insurance or upfront payment," she said wearily. I slapped the black card on the desk. "Swipe it." 2 hours later, my arm was treated, wrapped in high-grade bandages, and the pain was a dull throb thanks to the medication. My next stop was Michigan Avenue, the Magnificent Mile. I walked into a high-end Italian suit shop, the kind of place where they offer you espresso when you walk in. The salesman, a guy with a tape measure around his neck, looked at me and actually stepped in front of the rack of suits, blocking me. "Deliveries are in the back," he sneered. I looked at him. "I'm not here to deliver. I'm here to buy. I need a suit. Well, charcoal. Tailored. Today." "Sir, our suits start at $3,000, he said, looking at my boots. "I'll take 3, I said. "And a coat, cashmere, and shoes." "Throw these boots in the trash." I pulled out a stack of cash I had withdrawn from the bank. The salesman's attitude changed so fast he almost got whiplash. By 5 p.m., I looked in the mirror. Joshua Sterling stared back. The hollow cheeks were still there, but the clothes fit like armor. The charcoal suit made my shoulders look broader. The long cashmere coat hid the bandages. I looked like my father. I walked out of the store and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years. "Rusty Spoon, this is Anthony," the voice barked. "Anthony, it's Josh. I told you, don't come back until next week. And bring a doctor's note." "I'm not coming back next week," I said, my voice calm. "I quit." "You what?" "You can't quit. You have the Saturday shift. If you quit, I'm keeping your last check." "Keep it," I said. "Use it to buy yourself a personality transplant." I hung up. It was petty, but God, it felt good. The next morning, I met Mr. Lincoln at his office. "It's done," he said, sliding a thick document across the table. "The bid was accepted at 9 a.m. The deed has been transferred to Phoenix Holdings." "That's you." "Does Elijah know?" "He knows the house was sold. He doesn't know to whom. He has been given 48 hours to vacate the premises." 48 hours, I mused. That's more time than he gave me. "He's refusing to leave," Lincoln said. "He's barricaded himself inside. He's claiming squatters' rights. He's making a scene." "Let him make a scene," I said. "I want to watch." "There is one more thing," Lincoln said. "Elijah is selling things. He's trying to liquidate assets before the eviction. He listed the car collection this morning." The cars. I remembered my dad's vintage Mustang. I remembered the Rolls-Royce he bought for special occasions. "I put a stop to it," Lincoln said. "The lien on the house covers the contents of the garage. But Elijah is volatile. He might try to run." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the Chicago skyline. I felt a surge of power I had never experienced before. For 5 years, I had been the victim. I had been the one reacting to the world. Now I was the one making the moves. "He won't run," I said. "He's too arrogant to run. He thinks he can talk his way out of this. He thinks the world owes him a living." I turned back to Lincoln. "I need a car. And a driver." "What kind of car?" "Something loud," I said. "Something that says I'm here." Lincoln smiled. "I think the estate's Rolls-Royce Phantom is currently being held at the impound lot pending the auction. I can have it released to the new owner within the hour." "Perfect," I said. "Get it cleaned. I have a housewarming party to attend." The day of the eviction arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. It was one of those heavy, overcast Chicago mornings where the air feels electric, like a storm is holding its breath just waiting for permission to break. I sat in the back of the Rolls-Royce Phantom. The windows were tinted so dark that the world outside looked like a movie playing on a screen. Inside, it was quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the engine and the rhythmic breathing of Hunter, the head of my new private security detail, who was driving. I looked down at my hands. They were resting on the knees of my $3,000 charcoal suit. The bandages on my arm were hidden beneath layers of cashmere and silk. Just 7 days ago, these same hands had been cracked, bleeding, and scrubbing grease off a diner counter. Now they were manicured, clean, but my heart was hammering against my ribs just like it did back then. "We're turning onto the street now, Mr. Sterling," Hunter said, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. "It looks lively." "Lively is one word for it," I murmured. I looked out, the quiet, tree-lined street of the North Shore, where doctors and CEOs mowed their lawns with military precision, had turned into a circus. There were 3 police cruisers parked haphazardly on the lawn. Their lights were flashing, red and blue strobes cutting through the gray morning. A massive orange moving truck, commissioned by the bank, was idling in the driveway, its exhaust puffing white clouds into the cold air. But it was the noise that hit me first, even through the soundproof glass of the rolls. Screaming. High-pitched, hysterical screaming. "Pull up right to the gate," I ordered. "Block the driveway." Hunter nodded. The massive black car glided forward like a shark entering a school of fish. We stopped inches from the wrought iron gates, the same gates I had walked out of 5 years ago with snow soaking my socks. I didn't get out immediately. I watched. The front door of the manor was wide open. Furniture was scattered on the porch. A velvet armchair overturned. A lamp shattered on the stone steps. It looked like a war zone. And there they were. Elijah was standing on the top step. He looked deranged. He was wearing a silk bathrobe that was hanging open, revealing stained pajama pants. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was sticking up in wild tufts. He was holding a golf club in one hand and a bottle of expensive scotch in the other. "You have no right." Elijah was screaming at a weary-looking sheriff's deputy. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. I'll sue you. I'll sue the bank. I'll sue the city." Chloe was right behind him. She looked even worse. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black streaks, making her look like a raccoon. She was clutching a Louis Vuitton bag to her chest like a life preserver, sobbing loudly. "Tell them, Elijah," she shrieked. "Tell them to get away from my things. That mover just touched my grandmother's vase." "Ma'am, the house has been sold," the deputy said, his voice amplified by a megaphone. "You have been given 48 hours to vacate. You are now trespassing. Drop the club, Mr. Sterling, or we will have to detain you." "Sold." Elijah laughed, a manic, cracking sound. "Sold to who? Some shell company? Some faceless coward? I demand to see the owner. Bring him here. I bet he doesn't have the guts to look me in the eye." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was cold. It was the smile of a man who held every ace in the deck. "Hunter," I said softly, "open the door." Hunter stepped out, walked around the back of the car, and opened my door with a professional flourish. I stepped out. The sound of my Italian leather shoes hitting the pavement was sharp and distinct. Click, click, click. I adjusted my sunglasses. I buttoned my cashmere coat, and I started walking toward the gate. The scene froze. The neighbors, who had gathered on the sidewalk with their phones out to record the drama, went silent. The police officers turned to look at the new arrival. The movers stopped lifting a sofa. Everyone was looking at the man in the black coat stepping out of the black Phantom. Elijah squinted. He was drunk, angry, and panicked. He didn't recognize me. He saw the suit. He saw the car. He saw the posture. "You!" Elijah shouted, pointing the golf club at me. "Are you the vulture? Are you the one who bought my house out from under me?" I didn't answer. I just kept walking. "Answer me!" Elijah yelled, stumbling down a step. "Do you know who I am? I am a Sterling. You can't just buy a Sterling out. How much do you want? I'll pay you double. I have investors coming next week. I'm good for it." "He's lying," a neighbor shouted from the sidewalk. He borrowed $500 from me for pizza last week. Elijah whipped around to scream at the neighbor, but I was at the gate now. Mr. Lincoln, my lawyer, stepped out from behind a police car. He was holding a thick file. He nodded to the sheriff. "Officer," Lincoln said, his voice cutting through the wind. "This is the owner. Please, open the gate." The deputy looked at me, then at Lincoln. He nodded and pushed the heavy iron gates open. They creaked, a sound I remembered from my childhood. I walked up the driveway. I walked past the police cars. I walked past the movers. I walked right up to the bottom of the porch steps, looking up at the brother who had looked down on me my entire life. Elijah was panting now. He looked confused. There was something familiar about me, but his brain couldn't process it. He couldn't reconcile the brother he had kicked into the snow with the powerful figure standing before him. "Who are you?" Elijah whispered, his voice trembling. "Take off those glasses." I reached up with a gloved hand. I hooked a finger under the rim of my sunglasses and slowly, deliberately, pulled them off. I looked him dead in the eyes. "Hello, Elijah." The color drained from his face so fast I thought he was going to pass out. He staggered back, dropping the golf club. It clattered loudly down the stone steps, landing at my feet. "Josh," he choked out, came out as a squeak. A terrified, disbelief-filled squeak. "No," Chloe gasped, stepping forward. She wiped her eyes, smearing the black makeup further. That can't be Josh. Josh is a dishwasher. Josh is a bum." "Joshua Sterling," Mr. Lincoln announced loudly, standing beside me like a town crier, "is the sole owner of Phoenix Holdings, and as of 9 a.m. yesterday, the legal owner of this estate." Elijah's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. He looked at the Rolls-Royce behind me. He looked at my suit. He looked at the way the police were stepping back to give me space. "You," Elijah stammered. "You bought it? With what? You didn't have a dime. You were begging for scraps." "I had exactly what Mom and Dad left me," I said calmly. "The card you laughed at. The card you tried to make me throw away." Elijah's eyes widened. "The $1,000? You turned $1,000 into this? That's impossible. You're lying. You stole it. Officer, arrest him. He's a thief." "The card wasn't for $1,000, Elijah," I said, my voice barely raised but carrying pure authority. "It was a trust fund. $5 million. Locked away for 5 years. Waiting for the day you finished destroying yourself." Elijah froze. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He did the math instantly. He realized that while he was blowing the family fortune on parties and bad bets, I was walking around with a fortune in my pocket, protected by our parents' foresight. "They knew," Elijah whispered. "Mom and Dad. They knew?" "They knew everything," I said. "They knew you were a gambler. They knew you were greedy. And they knew you would leave me to die if they gave me the money up front." I took a step up the stairs. Elijah shrank back. "So they gave you the house," I continued. "They gave you the rope, Elijah. And just as they predicted, you used it to hang yourself." Elijah looked around. He saw the judgment in the eyes of the neighbors. He saw the smirk on the face of the movers. He realized his humiliation was total and public. And then his survival instinct kicked in. The same instinct that made him kick me out 5 years ago. He turned on Chloe. He shoved her. Hard. "It's her fault," Elijah screamed, pointing a shaking finger at his wife. "Josh, listen to me. It's her. She made me spend the money. She wanted the vacations. She wanted the renovations. I told her we needed to save, but she wouldn't listen." Chloe stumbled back, hitting the doorframe. She looked at her husband with absolute shock. "What?" she screeched. "You lying snake. Who bet 200 grand on the Super Bowl? Who bought the crypto? You did. You forged my signature on the second mortgage. She's a gold digger, Josh," Elijah yelled, scrambling down the stairs toward me, his hands out in a pleading gesture. "I'm a victim here. I'm your brother. We're blood. You can't let her drag me down. Just Just kick her out. Let me stay. We can run the company together. Like Dad wanted. I watched him. It was pathetic. It was sickening. 5 minutes ago, he was ready to defend his house with a golf club. Now he was throwing his wife to the wolves to save his own skin. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just let him ramble. I can help you invest, Elijah babbled, sweat pouring down his face. I know people. I have connections. We're Sterlings, Josh. Us against the world. Right? He reached out to touch my shoulder. Hunter, my security guard, stepped forward instantly, blocking him with a massive arm. Elijah bounced off Hunter like a rubber ball. Don't touch him, Hunter growled. Chloe saw her husband betray her. Her eyes narrowed. She realized her ship was sinking, and she needed a new lifeboat. She ran down the stairs, pushing past Elijah. She dropped her Louis Vuitton bag and fell to her knees right in front of me on the cold concrete. Joshua, please, she sobbed, reaching for the hem of my coat. I always liked you. You know that, right? I told Elijah to be nice to you. He forced me to be mean. I was scared of him. You laughed, I said, looking down at her. When he kicked me out into the blizzard. You sat on that couch and you laughed. I was nervous, she wailed. Joshua, look at us. We're family. Blood is thicker than water. You can't do this to family. Where will we go? We have nowhere. Blood is thicker than water. That phrase again. The weapon they had used to cut me deep 5 years ago. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Mr. Lincoln, I said. Play it. Mr. Lincoln held up a tablet connected to a portable speaker he had brought. He tapped the screen. A video started playing. It was grainy, black and white footage from the security camera in the foyer. Timestamp, 5 years ago. On the screen, a younger Elijah was shoving a younger Joshua toward the door. The audio crackled, then came through clear as day. You were never really one of us, Josh. You were a pet. A charity case. Blood is thicker than water. Then Chloe's voice, sharp and cruel. The house is Elijah's. We don't want house guests. Then Elijah again. Take your $1,000 and get out. The video ended. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. I put my phone away. You're right, Chloe, I said, my voice ice cold. Blood is thicker than water. You guys made that very clear to me. You told me I wasn't a Sterling. You told me I was a stranger. I leaned in closer, looming over them. So, out of respect for your wishes, I am going to treat you exactly like strangers. And strangers don't get to live in my house. Elijah's face twisted into a mask of pure hate. You adopted trash. You stole my birthright. It wasn't a birthright, I said. It was a test. And you failed. I turned to the sheriff. Sheriff, I want these trespassers removed from my property. Immediately. If they return, I want them arrested for harassment. You got it, Mr. Sterling, the sheriff said. He signaled his deputies. No, no, Elijah screamed as 2 officers grabbed his arms. He kicked and thrashed, his bathrobe falling open, exposing his pathetic state to the entire neighborhood. I'm Elijah Sterling. I own this town. Not anymore, buddy, the deputy said, dragging him toward the sidewalk. Chloe was dragged away next, screaming obscenities at me, then at Elijah, then at the world. I stood there and watched. I watched as they were hauled past the beautiful wrought iron gates. I watched as the deputies tossed them onto the public sidewalk like bags of garbage. The movers shut the back of the truck. The neighbors started whispering excitedly, capturing the downfall of the golden child for social media. Elijah stood up on the sidewalk, shivering in the cold wind, just as I had done 5 years ago. He looked at me through the bars of the gate. I'll get you for this, he screamed. This isn't over. I looked at Hunter. Close the gate. Hunter pushed a button on the remote. The heavy iron gates began to swing shut. Clang. The sound was final. It was the sound of a book closing. I turned my back on them. I didn't look back to see them shivering. I didn't look back to see where they would go. It wasn't my problem. I walked up the steps of the porch. I stepped over the broken lamp. I reached out and pushed open the heavy oak front door. I was home. The air inside the house was stale. It smelled of dust, old anxiety, and neglect. I walked into the foyer. The grand chandelier was dark. Several bulbs were burnt out. There were rectangular clean spots on the walls where expensive paintings used to hang. Paintings Elijah had likely sold for pennies on the dollar to fuel his gambling habits. I walked slowly. Every step brought back a memory. Here, on the stairs, was where Mom used to sit and wait for me to come home from school. There, in the dining room, was where Dad taught me how to tie a tie before my first homecoming dance. The house felt wounded. Elijah had stripped it of its warmth. There were wine stains on the carpets. There were holes punched in the drywall. Evidence of Elijah's legendary temper tantrums when a bet didn't go his way. I walked past the library. I couldn't go in there yet. That was the scene of the crime. That was where my life had been shattered. Instead, I climbed the stairs. My hand trailed along the banister. It was covered in a layer of dust. I walked down the long hallway to the master bedroom. The double doors were closed. I pushed them open. The room was surprisingly intact. Elijah and Chloe had clearly preferred the guest wing, perhaps finding the master bedroom too haunted by the presence of our parents. The room smelled of them, faint but there. The cedar wood of my father's cologne. The lavender sachets my mother kept in her drawers. I walked over to the bed. It was stripped of sheets, just a bare mattress. I sat down on the edge. The silence here wasn't menacing. It was heavy, yes, but it felt like a warm blanket. I closed my eyes. I did it. I whispered into the empty room. I got it back. I imagined them sitting in the two armchairs by the window. Dad reading his paper. Mom knitting. For 5 years I had hated them. I had cursed their names every time I had to eat expired bread or tape up my boots. I had built a fortress of resentment around my heart. But that fortress had crumbled the moment I saw the video. They hadn't abandoned me. They had saved me. They had known that if I grew up with money, if I had everything handed to me like Elijah, I might have ended up just like him. Weak, entitled, broken. Instead, they gave me the greatest gift of all. They gave me the struggle. The struggle had forged me. It had burned away the softness and left behind steel. I knew the value of $1 because I had bled for it. I knew the value of loyalty because I had been betrayed. I knew who I was, not because of my last name, but because of what I had survived. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out over the sprawling estate. The police cars were gone. The street was empty. Elijah and Chloe had vanished into the city, to face a future they were completely unprepared for. I felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of responsibility. I had $5 million. I had a mansion. I had the sterling name. What was I going to do with it? Buy more cars? Throw parties? Become another Elijah? No. I remembered the nights in the basement. I remembered the hunger. I remembered the feeling of being an outsider, a charity case. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Lincoln. Mr. Sterling? Lincoln answered on the first ring. Is everything all right? Everything is perfect, Lincoln, I said. But we have work to do. Work? I want to set up a meeting. Tomorrow morning. Bring the paperwork for a foundation. A foundation? Lincoln asked, his voice perking up. The Phoenix Foundation, I said, looking at my reflection in the window. I want to focus on foster kids. Kids who age out of the system with nowhere to go. Kids who are told they don't belong. That sounds admirable, Joshua. I don't just want to give them money, I said, my mind racing with ideas. I want to give them scholarships, mentorships, housing. I want to turn this house, or at least the guest wing, into a transition center. I want to fill this place with life again. Real life. Not just rich people pretending to be happy. Your parents would be very proud, Lincoln said. I could hear the emotion in his voice. And Lincoln? Yes. Find Caleb. My friend Caleb. I want to offer him a job. Director of Operations. Double whatever he's making now. He was the only family I had when I had nothing. I want him by my side. Consider it done. I hung up. I walked out onto the balcony. The wind had died down. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing slivers of blue sky. The sun was trying to peek through. I took a deep breath. The air tasted crisp and clean. I wasn't just Joshua Sterling, the heir. I was Joshua Sterling, the survivor. And I was just getting started. My brother had tried to bury me. He didn't realize I was a seed. I looked down at the driveway one last time. The snow was melting. The path was clear. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. I whispered, looking up at the patch of blue sky. I won't let you down. I turned around and walked back inside, leaving the balcony doors open to let the fresh air flush out the stale past. It was time to get to work. Wow, what a journey, right? We've been through the absolute bottom with Joshua and risen all the way to the top. But before you click away, I want to take a second to talk about what this story really means. Because it's not just about revenge or Ferraris. First, resilience is your true inheritance. Joshua didn't survive because of the money. He survived because the struggle built his character. The money was just a tool he got later. If he had been weak like Elijah, that money would have destroyed him. The hard times you are going through right now, they are forging you into something unbreakable. Second, greed is a trap. Elijah had it all, the house, the name, the status. But his need for more blinded him. He chased fast money and lost the slow, steady wealth of family and stability. Don't let the desire for more make you lose what you already have. And finally, the biggest lesson of all. Family is an action, not just DNA. Elijah was blood, but he was an enemy. Caleb was a friend, but he acted like a brother. The Sterlings were parents not because they gave birth, but because they made the hard choices to protect their son. Never let anyone make you feel less than because you don't fit their traditional mold of family. I want to hear from you guys. What was the most satisfying part of this story for you? Was it the reveal in the bank? Or was it the moment the gates closed on Elijah? Type good in the comments if you believe that character always wins over greed in the end. I read every single comment, and knowing you're getting value from these stories keeps me going. Thanks for watching, family. I'll see you in the next one.